Hello, and welcome back to another episode of Critical Reactions with your host, Bryan. We are going to do an album review today. We're going to check out a full album and explore what each of the songs means in isolation and possibly within the larger extents of the album. We're going to be kicking it off with IOTUNN's Access All Worlds. I'm trying to dive into these less and less uninformed because there's a chance that it ends up ruining a little bit of my analysis and thus my enjoyment of the track, especially once we get to the back half if I'm not understanding the front half. So in an attempt to get things to run a little bit smoother, I did a little bit of looking into them. This is their debut album. They have an EP that they did before this, but this was their first full length. It is a concept album. So we wanted to make an epic, strong, and atmospheric, yet rocking record both musically and lyrically. John came with the idea based on space travelers trying to find answers to the apocalypse, which reflects many of the impressions, feelings, and thoughts human life holds that originates from something vast, mysterious, chaotic, and breathtakingly spectacular. Is everything occurring in the lyrics just a dream? Is the album an allegory for any individual's chapters in life? Where does the album actually start and end? Stuff like that are open for interpretation in various ways. So I'm not expecting to get the lyrics on this one. But we'll see where it takes us. A sci-fi themed thing sounds interesting. I saw they were listed as prog metal / melodeath. So kind of know what we're in for. Let's dive into it. There's 7 tracks. It's an hour long. Most of these tracks are pretty lengthy. We'll probably stop after each one to discuss what we heard. Starting off, the trip is Voyage of the Garganey 1. Synth and guitar. There is not a synth player in the band, so I wonder if this synth stuff is for the intro and won't be brought back up again. We'll find out. I like all the emotions here. If you listen to the right guitar, you get melancholy. The left guitar is a lot of riding that pedal tone. Hope mixed with tension. Yes, the drumming here. It's difficult to hear the cymbal work, but I love the way the ride is used against the snare accents. Oh, that bass work right there. Love to hear more of that. It's a really big epic feel right here. Is it gonna try to... Alright, cool. We have clean breaks in the middle of tracks here. That is going to make my life a lot easier. We got a lot to talk about here, which is pretty neat. Great introduction to the album. It is wild to think that this is their first album together. I don't know if any of these people have worked on music before. I don't know if this is like a side project. Probably should have looked at that. Actually, really difficult to find information about this. Well, I mean, it's difficult to find direct information. Wikipedia is usually pretty good about putting, this is a supergroup from these groups right in the first paragraph. But Wikipedia doesn't have an article for IOTUNN. Really, the only information I found about them was on their label page, Metal Blade Records bio for them, which doesn't mention anything about being oh, actually, there is. Yeah, it looks like the bassist. Oh, the vocalist is from Hamford. We've checked them out before, right? Or am I missing that? That's a band we've listened to, though, isn't it? Yep. So it's the vocal. Oh, okay. So I know, I know what he looks like now. Um. Okay, so this is not their first one. The bassist comes from Sunless Dawn. Um. Uh. Frederick. Who is Frederick? Frederick must be their mixer. He's mixed for In Flames, At the Gates, and Demu before. Yeah, so this isn't their first rodeo, so to speak. Okay. I was gonna say, if this is the first thing they've done out the gate, this is a phenomenal start. I haven't listened to their EP, so maybe that, that could have been a bit rougher, but usually there's not that big of a gap between your first EP and first LP. But if you're a super group, kind of, um, definitely you're going to come in punching pretty strong. So, with that out of the way, now that I know what's going on there, I do find it interesting. I don't normally want to start with negative, but we're already on the topic. I find it interesting that their mixer is somebody as renowned as they are. They've mixed for pretty big bands. And yet the production here sounds strange. And maybe it's that. I don't know, Demu's a pretty big band too. I was going to say maybe it's experience, not mixing or producing something as large in scale as this, but Demo makes some big music too. I would assume the experience is there. Anyways, this track so far is just very flat, lacking dynamics for something that is going for this larger than life sound. It is way too compressed. It never really feels like it reaches the heights it's aiming for. For instance, those final 15-20 seconds when we went to the 16th note picking and we went to the double bass kicks, I think it was, and just really going all energy, all in. We were playing the riffs we have been playing, but so much faster, so many more attacks. This should have been a really large moment, and it was just the same feeling as everything else. And it's just because there's no dynamic room in the track. Everything is at one level, and it's really difficult to make things feel larger or more grandiose when even the small parts are just as large feeling as your larger sections. And I really think that's going to hurt this album if it continues this way. It is, well, they said in their description of the album that it was an epic. They wanted to have good atmosphere and, rocking sections musically and lyrically. It's supposed to be this big atmospheric album, and it can't feel big unless it feels small at places. Um, and maybe if they start off strong and can come in from the silence, you're not listening to anything, then you open your first track, you're like, oh, that's pretty big. But if they keep it at 10 the whole album, that largeness that I already felt was diminished by the end of this track is going to feel completely flat by the end of it. I really hope that isn't the case, and this is just a floundering on the opening track, but yeah, there needs to be a lot more dynamic space on here in all sorts of directions. If they want it to feel as big as I think they're going for. Musically, it's big. Production wise, it's just not. So I think that's really my only negative so far on this. And I'm hoping it gets changed, but seeing as mixing is one of the last, well, mastering's the last thing you do, but um, Yeah, I guess you can mix in the middle of an album. Mixing could improve over an album, but when you're working with somebody who's mixed for other bands, I doubt they're going to be expanding their skills in the middle of an album. They've had plenty of time to refine their skill set to a point that they're pretty big producers. So yeah, I guess that's just going to be the style of this album, and if so, I think it's going to be a little underwhelming. Um, the emotion. I really like their atmospheric sections, their melodic sections. We had a really cool melodic I think it was melody and atmosphere in the middle. We had a very atmospheric opening. And I thought it was just really neat the complexity of emotions that they're able to interject in some of these. The beginning, as I was explaining before a dude came in and screamed to interrupt me, uh, if you listen to one of the guitars, I don't remember which one, they had a very melancholic line, but another one had a bit more of an adventurous line, and then the atmosphere was sort of this unknowing. It kind of, not unknowing, it lacked energy. It's kind of cold. That might be a good word for it. Distant, motionless. Um, if I were to wager guesses, the atmosphere would be space. It is very cold and uncaring about these space travelers going through it. Space just is. Also, space is cold, so like literally cold. So that's kind of cool too. But yeah, I think it's mostly just the emotionless element of the atmosphere at that point, and then you have the adventurous component, which is the exploration, and the melancholy, which is leaving behind everything. Or the description said something about an apocalypse or trying to find new worlds because Earth was exploded or something. I don't remember. I remember music good. Well, I don't remember words well. Oh man, I don't remember what I read 5 minutes ago, but tomorrow I'll still be able to tell you details about this album I'm listening to today. um, but yeah, so it's all of the emotions of the trip, this exploration, the task at hand, and the environment they're in. I thought it was a really cool opening. And then we explore some of this later on as well. And I don't remember what I'd mentioned them in the reaction when we got to the section. I was like, oh, this is kind of this plus this. And I don't remember what I said though. But yeah, they do their atmospheres really well. It's very clear and concise, I think, what their emotion is that they're going for. Um, which is both a positive and a negative thing. It works really well for surface reads. It gets the message across rather well. And sometimes that's what you need in art. Imagine trying to read, like a pop culture story. I don't know what's a big pop culture book IP these days. Star Wars. Like trying to read a Star Wars book, but the vocabulary is so far over your head, and you don't really understand what's going on, but you really want to. Like that doesn't work. Star Wars is kind of it's supposed to be simple, right? And I think that's what's going on here. They're not trying to be complex or deep. They want the story to be understood, and through that, it makes it for something that is immediately recognizable on the surface level, which kind of removes some of the listenability since there's no depth there. But it could be that they have depth in other places as well, or it could just be that this is a solid album through and through, and that's why people come back to it. Not necessarily to further explore it, but just to reintegrate themselves inside of the world that's crafted here. Some of my favorite films and albums are not ones that are exceptionally deep. I just really enjoy, engaging with that art. Um, but yeah, their emotional writing is very surface level. You pick it up immediately. They do such a good job of, like I said, just being very clear about what their atmosphere is supposed to be representing. And there's definitely a skill in that too. It's not like it's just, I'm not writing deep stuff, so now it's simple. No, it's still pretty difficult. And they're just really good at it. Um, What order should I take this in? Let's talk about the vocals. First of all, they're huge. Whether it's the growls or the cleans, there's a ton of reverb and double, maybe triple tracking on them. They're just very big and dominant in the mix. I think for me, it's going to be a neutral area. I do wish the vocals were back down a little bit. They take up so much room that, especially when the cleans come in, it's really difficult to hear anything else volume wise. Again, this is another production thing. I do not mean to rag on the production this hard. The vocals are they're very dominant though, especially the cleans. When the cleans come in, it's hard to hear anything else. Which is a bit, oh man, speaking of the production too, I forgot to talk about the fact that the drums are just unlistenable. Unhearable? That might be the word I want. Especially the cymbal work. The ride cymbal in that one section was really cool. I love the way it played around the snare accents, but it was so difficult to hear the ride cymbal. The bass kicks were just a little too muddy. I would have liked a little more clarity on. All in all, the production. Here's the thing. I just interrupted myself twice. I think the production is intentionally, I don't want to say lacking, but mid-fi. They're not going for a super clear, clean sound. And I think I just need to appreciate it on that level. I'm so used to prog bands going out of their way for exceptionally clean production in order to showcase all the cool stuff they're doing, that when I hear a band doing cool stuff and writing a concept album and going with a muddier production, I find a clash of intention. The production is undercutting the music, but if this is the specific feel that they wanted to go for, then I guess it's right. Because artistic intent is very important. How do they want this to sound? Is it supposed to be gritty? Maybe. Do I have to like it? No, but I will appreciate it if, and I think from here on out I'm going to attempt to view it from the perspective that it was the intention, that the band had this vision and the producer crafted it out of their recordings. But at least in my perspective of it, it undercuts the intentions of the composition and performance in some places. Like I said, it's really difficult to hear some lines that a lot of work probably went into practicing, and makes for a lesser album in my ears. My ears are different from everyone else's, and very different from the people who made it, and their opinion about the sound is a lot more important than mine. But I'm going to try to approach it from the angle that it was intentional and that the sound was gritty and a bit muddied and weighted less symmetrically than I would want. But it is their vision. We're going to go with that. Where were we though? Oh yeah, the vocals. They're very dominant and powerful. I'm curious if this is going to be a consistent motif throughout the album or if it was something for the intro to sort of give this opening narration or set the stage or something for the story going on. As we saw in the description from, I think it was from the vocalist, said it was about a group of space travelers trying to find answers in space. And so this could be, it's called the Voyage of the Garganey 1. I'm imagining their ship is called Garganey 1, and this could be the captain documenting a log, explaining what their purpose is. I don't know. So it has this grandiosity to it, which is all the reverb. I'm hoping that that's kind of pulled back, reined in a little bit over the next 6 tracks, but we'll see. The growls absolutely do not need that extra oomph though, and you can absolutely hear it in that first verse. There's some spaces where the vocals will stop and the growl will continue to echo out to the outsides, but it's, like I had mentioned, dynamically we're not looking at something exceptionally large. It's not, dynamically large. So the echo out to the side is still really close to your ears. It's not like a really big echo and a large sound sphere, which I think just makes it sound even bigger. If they had gone for more space and maybe had more horizontal distance, it probably wouldn't have felt as impactful, for better or worse. The impact here helps sell the largeness of it. It sounds like somebody speaking into a large megaphone into some speakers that are echoing through a valley. And there's something very big and grand about that. But it also sounds a little odd and out of place. Echoes tend to get more distant over time, and this one stays really close. So, I don't know. But I do like the vocal harmonies. I like the clean vocals. I think the dude's got a beautiful voice. Got really nice vibrato. The harmonies sound fantastic. The growls are growls. They sound like death growls to me. I don't really hear anything that would scream that they're this specific vocalist. Not that every vocalist needs a signature harsh style, but it just feels like a typical death scream, and I'm not a big fan of those, so I'm hoping we have more cleans, but I'm enjoying the diversity between the two at least. And I suppose the last thing is the drum work is just phenomenal. Absolutely love it. A lot of it kind of can be a little more typically death metal, but there are some really nice flourishes throughout. It's little moments of added character that show me a really interesting drummer. I'd like to see them open up just a bit more. Kind of inject a little bit more of their style into it. But if they stick with what they're doing here, it's going to be a solid album. There's some really nice fills, super precise, not overly technical, very tasteful with their flourishes. Just a solid drummer for this style of music through and through. Nothing bad I could say about him. Speaking of nothing bad, though, the composition to me, I love the atmospheric parts. We went over that as one of the first things I talked about. You guys know, it's the pedal tones. The verses are so boring to me. And I don't understand how this happens. It has to be intentional, but our chorus and our atmospheric sections have plenty. They're overloaded with harmonic information, with melodic information. We sometimes have harmonies and melodies going on together. There's so much rich musicalness going on in those moments. And then we get to the verse, and it is pedal tones and standard rigid drumming and growls. Pretty much everything is purely textural and or rhythmic. Everything is hyper rigid as far as rhythmic ideas go. There's no syncopation or varying lengths of notes. Contrasting versus the atmospheric bridge and the atmospheric post choruses and the choruses themselves, this is a flat line of ideas with some spikes every once in a while at the end of a 4-bar phrase, usually when we get our guitar lick and possibly a drum fill, and then it flatlines again. That makes it sound like it's dead, but it sits on one idea and just rides it out for so long. And like I said, contrasting it with every other section of the track, it feels so boring to me. And the thing I have to keep in mind too, right, is that this pedal tone idea with a lick at the end is very popular. So many bands have done it for so many years. This is something that I remember even finding in hard rock tracks back in the whatever that was, 50s, 60s. This is just a really old idea as far as rock and metal riff writing goes. It's been around for so long because it works. People like it, both as composers, musicians, your listeners, your fans love it too. And I suppose there is a rule of cool thing going on with it. It is just absolutely not my jam. And to have it contrast so heavily when we hit something that I'm absolutely loving and come down to pretty much the opposite end of the spectrum, it feels like a gut punch. I just want to turn the song off at every verse, but I don't, because, well, I mean, I'm listening to an album here for y'all, so that would be rude for me to end this video right here or to skip a track. But I know that right around the corner is going to be something that I'm going to enjoy a lot. And why I wanted to bring this up isn't necessarily to say I don't like this. It's to say that this track and the album so far has given me some fantastic highs and some really low lows. And those are very subjective things. I'm sure that some people might feel the inverse is true, where the verses are just killer metal sections and the choruses are too poppy. There's too much cleans, too many harmonic ideas. Everybody has different tastes. But there is such a divide here, which I think is interesting on its own. The band is really good at sort of hitting both sides of metal. That rule of cool, heavy, oh my god, this is death metal. This is melodic death metal, actually. I should have expected some of the stuff like the verse, because I feel like it just clicked with me. I've said a lot of these things when we did Melodeath Week, is that the melodic sections really worked for me, the textural rhythmic stuff did not. And that's exactly what's going on here. So, yeah, once again, it's just a gear shift for me. Now that I know, and I probably should have known coming into this, what type of music I'm in store for, I've got to get my expectations right, and meet the song on its own grounds. Because asking for more of the atmospheric stuff isn't going to be fair. That's not the type of music they're making. They're making music that balances the atmospheric stuff with the more traditional death writing. And I have to accept that. I'm going to take a quick look at the lyrics and we'll move on. So one cool aspect here is that Genius has told me that IOTUNN is actually an Old Norse word for giant, which is pretty cool. On the topic of Voyage of the Garganey 1, this does it does kind of line up with what I said. It's a captain's log to dictate what's going on with this journey. It speaks about space. Actually, it's some of the first words. Empty immensity defied, matter splayed across the monochrome, acting in the guise of a boundless void, and between them, traces of the unknown lifelines, every path of equal promise. Matter splayed across the monochrome. The monochrome is space, the blackness of space with the white dots of stars, and there's matter all through space. It says that there's so many traces of pathways to life. There's so many paths we can take in our search for answers. Every path has equal promise, just showing the vastness of space, the unlimitedness of direction and distance that they could go in. It says, as children we would scream, we wielded the weapon of innocence, dark bottomless wells of mindless hope, filled through countless aeons of survival philosophy. Which I think is alluding back to the destruction of their world. We do see a little bit more of that later on. It says, life eternal in the hands of so few, at the cost of our dreams, we are in the throes of expectancy and violent consternation. Which makes me think that whatever happened on their home planet was done so by the few. Life eternal in the hands of so few. We have wiped out our, life eternal, the way I read that is that we can continue to reproduce. Humanity will always exist. not that any one person is eternal, but that humanity can be eternal, and it was all thrown away by the hands of so few. So just a couple of people brought about the end of an entire species. Says it was it cost us our dreams. Their choices cost us our dreams. So yeah, it kind of sets up the listener to figure out what's going on in here. It tells them where we're at, sort of who we are. I don't know how much of this I would have got without the little explanation from one of the band members, but I'm really glad I went and saw that because it puts a lot of this in perspective. And like I said, the music sort of captures some of this as well. The opening has the positivity, the hopefulness, the excitement, the melancholy, the coldness of space, all wrapped up in their opening idea. We experience a few, what do they call, atmospheric sections throughout the track that usually have some sort of mixed emotion to them, and that's exactly what's going on here. This dude is obviously angry at the few people who made the decision to annihilate the human race. But also there's this excitement for this mission, for this journey, as well as an admiration of, and maybe even a little bit of fear of space. And all of it comes through in the music for the most part. We end it with, "Slow is my flight through this void. The worlds I imagined carry me home." All right, let's move on in this journey. Access All Worlds. This is going to be our title track. This is one of the longer ones on the album. Yep, second longest track on the album at 11.5 minutes. We seem to go back and forth on this. We have a shorter one, which tends to be about 7 minutes, and then a longer one, which is double digits. We have an 11, a 10, and almost a 14. And that seems to be the pattern throughout here, except 5 and 6, we have 2 short ones. But otherwise, it's always short, long, short, long, short, long. So we got this nice TikTok idea going on. Not the streaming app, of course, just the idea of a tick and a tock, 2 sides of a coin, a cycle that repeats. So let's continue on. Check out Access All Worlds. So we have a 10-beat phrase, but it feels like it's 4/4/2 or maybe 4/6 rather than 5/5. Two, 3, 4, 1, 2, 3, 4, 1, 2, 1, 2. Yeah, it definitely feels like a 4/4/2 pulse. Okay, we got some spoken word. Spoken word's a bit quieter. Hard to hear what was said underneath the guitar work, which is the exact opposite of how all the other vocals are produced. There's a weariness in this track. I love that. Oh man. Listen to the bass. Oh, we're gonna change sections. The bass has a bit of a call and response against that guitar line, and it's so good how they play them back to back like that. Yeah, the way the vocals and guitar line are working off of each other, that's so good. That's two sections back to back of inter-instrument interplay that works so well. And the guitars are already harmonizing with each other, and they're counterpointing against the vocals. And once again, the vocals come in, the harsh vocals, and the guitars simplify too. Now is the time for the guitars to shine. There's nothing melodic to compete with. there's the synth again. Glad to hear that back. That's the precision I'm talking about. That tom fill was phenomenal. Punking it up a little bit. I think it's interesting how far we've come from the beginning, but the underlying feeling of the track hasn't really changed. I don't know if that's because we've stuck with one idea and modulated on it, or if the transitions have just been so smooth that it just feels like one section. I really want the drums to wrap around the guitar here, and they don't. Oh, you heard that darkness? Yeah. Beautiful section too. All right. So I made a note for myself. Don't talk about production, because I'm trying to stop. I just have two things, real quick. First of all, this song was another one that I felt was supposed to be massive and just wasn't, unfortunately. Musically, I think it's there. It's just a bit flat. It's missing those dynamic qualities. The other thing, though, is the vocals. The first time spoken word came around, the vocals were just a bit too quiet, which was just strange, because actually the only time the spoken word came around, because the next time we just got clean vocals, just a bit lower in pitch. So yeah, when when the spoken word came in, it was just a hair bit quiet, which is strange because it's the exact opposite that the vocals have been produced this entire time, or mixed, I should say. And then the drummings, the drumming, the drumming during the guitar solo there at the end was lacking punch. It should have been enveloping the guitar solo and working within it, because there were some really cool ideas, but they ended up feeling separated. So much distance between them, which is weird, because I'll also argue that the entire track is overly compressed, but somehow they found a way to put space between the instruments in a compressed track. I don't know. That's kind of award winning. It should be award winning on its own. It seems impossible. um, but it's one of the few times I would want to hear that impossible feat. They were definitely the one for something big, and they found a way to put emptiness, space in the middle of their song. Very strange idea. But no more production talk for the rest of the video. I gotta have better impulse control here. Something I forgot to talk about on the first track is the bass work. Absolutely love it. I wish the bass would have been brought up just a little bit. I want a remaster of this album. I do. Have they made it? Oh, we have an acoustic version of it, which came out last year. Oh, this is actually pretty new. February of 21. But yeah, we have an acoustic version of it, which I don't think I would like. Oh, it's only one track? It's 16 and a half minutes. So it'd be a medley? Oh, see, that's neat. So it's not an acoustic version of all the songs. It's an acoustic medley. Or maybe an addendum? It's called an acoustic Voyage, but it only has one track on it from what I can see. I gotta look this up real quick. Over at Metal Archives. An acoustic Voyage. There's one track at 16 minutes. No reviews on it. No drums on it. No bass on it. Our bassist? Is this our bassist? No, our drummer. So Askell is no bass on this at all, and the drummer is playing synths and doing sound effects. Oh, the drummer also did the engineering, mixing, and mastering, so it was mixed by someone else. Depending on how long this video is, I might try to tack that on the end. I gotta hear that. It might it might address so much. Oh man. But yeah, the bass work is phenomenal. I wish it was a little louder. It's really difficult for me to hear anything on the lower strings. It's usually only when they start riffing on the higher strings that I can begin to make out some of the sounds. That could be me though. I don't have the bass particularly loud on my headphones. I try to keep it as balanced as possible, and my hearing for bass tone is just it's garbage. I don't hear lower end frequencies very well. So that one might not be on me in particular. But the bass work is phenomenal. I had mentioned there at the middle point, I think it was, that we had this really neat guitar line, and after the line was over, the guitar would hold out a note and like do a much slower melody. And during this slower melody, when it was mostly fixating on longer notes, the bass would come in and put an extra. It's almost like they continued the faster idea, and they did this swapping of the roles, where one instrument would be playing long notes and the other one would be playing faster ones on top of it, and then midway through the riff, they just switch. and it sounds so good. And then we had the vocals on top of it, and the guitar wasn't just one guitar doing it, it was harmonized. Both guitars were working on this, and just both guitars, the bass and the vocals, were all working together to tell this beautiful section with phenomenal counterpoint and passing of the baton and harmonization. And man, I want more of that. I know it's melodeath, and we gotta balance the melodic with the death, but honestly, if they wrote a whole album that was purely melodic and atmospheric, I think I would be completely sold. I love their guitar tones, I love the bass tone, I love the vocal tone, I love the way they work together, I love the way they compose together. It is gorgeous. And then, as soon as I'm falling in love with a section, we bring back something more death oriented. Um, and it's good. I mean, it's solid death metal. I'm just not a big fan of death metal. And the synth came back. And I had mentioned that there is no synth personnel listed, which I thought was kind of weird. But I'm going to go kind of guess that it's the drummer, Bjorn Anderson, since that person does the synthesizer for the acoustic version. Oh, there's a limited edition too. Oh, but it seems there's no new tracks on it. Okay. 1 hour and 1 minute. That is a lot of music for 7 songs. That is pretty much everything that I had written down for notes. Everything else in the song reflected a lot of my same ideas that I had on the first track. There's some really solid atmospheric writing in here. There's solid melodic writing. There's solid death metal work, if that's your jam. And they find a way to bounce back and forth, the two of them. The production hasn't changed. The riffage really hasn't changed much. I do want to talk about structure. I don't know what the structure is on this track. What I had mentioned during the reaction is that most of this song felt like one section to me, and I'm not sure why. It's possible that they stuck with one idea and did variations of it through the course of the song, but retaining that core element somehow, some way across everything. It's also possible that they kept the same chord progression throughout, which would keep the emotional side stabilized. It's possible that they made minor variations across it, and if I actually compared our final section to our first section, it'd be night and day, but because it was this gradual, cohesive shifting throughout the track, I never really noticed we were changing. All of the changes were minute enough that I didn't catch it. Whatever, though, it felt like an 11-minute single section, a single A section that could be broken up by higher level ideas. We did have our growling sections. We had a guitar solo section. We could break it up by what the melody was doing, I suppose we could say. But breaking it up based on foundational ideas, no. I don't think I could do that after this listen. Everything feels very samey from the beginning to the end, which I'm hoping ties into something because the last track didn't do that. So this feels like a very intentional decision to keep a familiar atmosphere throughout the entire track. It's also really difficult to make one sound interesting for 11 minutes, so I gotta give some credit where credit's due there. They did a phenomenal job the 11 minutes went by so fast. I was digging the song, closed my eyes for a couple seconds, opened them up, and we're 9 minutes and we're almost done with the track. I'm like, wow, that's pretty good. And I think that hits everything I wanted to talk about for this one. This album's going real fast and it's going down real smooth. I have some, I've had some complaints about it, but all in all, I think it's something I could probably listen to again. We'll see if I'm saying that in the back half. This might be a little much for me. An hour's worth of music, where half of it isn't my favorite, could wear me down a little bit. But 20 minutes in, we're a third of the way done, and I'm like, yeah, I could probably do some more of this. You know, this seems like the type of album that would have a Reddit post breaking down every single song lyrically. But I didn't seem to find one. I was really hoping to, because, I mean, I'm not a great person at breaking down poetry, right? We've established this. What I get out of this track is the endless journey, or so it seems, an endless journey. At some point far into their task at hand, to find answers or possibly a new home. And having seen so much and kind of realizing that it's all sort of the same. All of them being a far cry from home, yet feeling as if we belong there, as we did here. And here, to me, speaks about being on the ship and them finding the ship to be a home. We're a far cry from our original planet, but this new planet, we feel like we belong here just as much as we belong on our ship. Oh! He's not saying that we do belong here. He says we belong here as much as we did on the ship. And I don't know how they feel about being on the ship, though. Maybe that's why they keep leaving and searching and finding more worlds. It's called Access All Worlds, right? The idea, I think, is to gather as much data as possible from every civilization or every world out there, trying to access all of them. But eventually, it kind of reaches a point where none of it matters. Once you've reached once you understand how infinite the universe is and just how different and similar things are, as you begin to see the patterns of life, but also realize just how distinct every planet is, or every galaxy, or every solar system, every universe. It almost becomes meaningless. It all kind of feels very samey after a point. And he kind of digs into a little bit of that as well. Interestingly, says every speck of light that passes, a new dawn abides. Miracle or disaster, we shall know soon enough. Interesting that a new dawn, which could be not necessarily a sun rising, but the possibility of a new place to settle or having the answers they're looking for, is a new instance, a new possibility of ending this trek. Says some of these says they could be miracle or disaster. Wanderers, to some they may seem lost, mere poets of dismay, build reality by breaking it down. So they create an understanding of reality by analyzing it. Just like I could call these musical analyses musical breakdowns. So they break down reality, they analyze it, figure out what it is in order to build an understanding of reality. It says, I know that I could never express what those waves of desire revealed to me. I don't know what those waves of desire are, though. But yeah, this song just seems to me about the endless journey and all the planets they've seen, all the civilizations they've found and discovered, all the information they've documented. Calls it maintaining the spoke of eternity's battered wheel. What was another line that I thought was really good? Faster and faster through the unending black. Yeah, just constantly going in and scooping up data. And I think that's, like I said, everything just kind of blurs together at one point. The first planet you meet, like, wow, this is interesting. Third, fourth, fifth, sixth. And this was my journey through metal as well. 4 years ago when we started this channel, I was like, wow, this is different and that's different. And now I feel like everything I listen to, I compare things. Oh, reminds me of this other band mixed with this band. Oh, this is this genre with like a little dash of that. Nothing is new to me. Everything's been documented, and thus it is compared and contrasted against the database that I have in my mind now. Man, that's sad. IOTUNN, why did you make me sad? But like, I get that here, and I think that's why the atmosphere is all sort of samey. We have different melodic lines, different aspects of the track that might help differentiate everything, but the emotion of it is unchanging for the most part. The atmosphere is similar from start to finish. The journey itself is now becoming mundane at this point. Off to the next planet, collect that data, leave. Go to the next planet, collect that data, leave. It's no longer about finding new things, it's about documenting it, putting it in its place in your database. Huh. Well, that's kind of all I've done with this album, too, so far. Talk about how it's definitely melodeath. Does some unique things, but fits well within the boxes of melodic death metal. Kind of took all the steam out of me. Let's continue on. The next track, Laihem's Golden Pits. Let's see where this one takes us. Oh, this one's only 4.5? What comes after this? Oh, a long one. So yeah, we'll stop after this. Got that alternating bassing and snare idea. I love the bass lining up with the guitars here. Oh, compressed clean. I can get behind that. Very Gojira. I'm doing it again. It is though, right? You're getting huge Gojira vibes, which is very cool. That previous section felt like mastery, control, triumph. Yeah, I like that open hi-hat idea there. Layered harshes, yeah. I like the descending idea with the 16th notes. That works really well. That's 3 for 3 on big echoey fade outs, isn't it? I think so. We hit our last hit, it's like, whoa, whoa, whoa. And then a lot of silence. There's like 5 seconds of silence at the end of each of these tracks, which I wonder how much was sort of added for the Bandcamp version. Because the thing is like, digital versions are very different than vinyl or CD, where you can control the space between tracks. And here you don't have that space between tracks, not like on the CD or on the vinyl itself. So you have to make it in the file, and so you end up with these extra moments at the end. And it's very possible when it was mastering, they just tacked on an extra 2 or 3 seconds at the end of each song to compensate. I don't know. So this song came out the gate swinging, just going real hard on it. It wasn't long until we got into that really quick, thrashy, alternating snare and bass kick idea. 16th note guitaring through a lot of this. We had a brand new vocal type, the compressed clean, which I thought was very cool. A very heavy opening. Not really going for width, but going for filling in the sound sphere and getting a nice wall of sound. This was complemented by the both guitars and the bass all playing the exact same thing, furthering this idea of a singular sound, that wall of sound. An interesting change. We didn't really experience much of the melodic elements here. We did have some guitar solos, which I haven't really talked about much. I probably should. I didn't hear the synth in here at all. The guitar solos are really nice. Depending on where they're placed, we usually get a really nice mix of more noodly, shreddy stuff and more atmospheric writing that understands what the song is aiming for emotionally and leaning into it. And they do a good job balancing the two. I would use the term tasteful. They're definitely tasty solos, but tasteful is usually more about the balancing of both sides and understanding what works well for the song. But yeah, like I said, that's not something we've really brought up much, but it is consistent. Every time there's a guitar solo, it's usually a really nice balancing between those two. And this one was not different. We did utilize a little bit more shreddy stuff going on, a little bit more noodly of it, but there was still some more atmospheric stuff, allowing the solo to breathe. Something I am noticing is that there's just no pauses in the solos. Very rock and metal, guitar-oriented soloing for sure, but it's just interesting coming off of so many jazz tracks last week. We had at least 2, I think, maybe a third one, where the solos were a mix of sound and silence, whereas most of these metal solos are just sounds. And this is not a point, again, not throwing any shade at IOTUNN. This is how metal solos are typically composed. It's just really interesting comparative to the solos we've explored this week that have utilized more aerophone instruments. And so space or silence or rests are just as much a part of the solo as the music is. So it's just something that's recent, something in my mind about what I've listened to recently against this. I'm curious where this takes us, though. We just had 2 songs that were very melodeath, balancing melodic and straight death metal. And this one, we pretty much go straight for pure death and even pushing a little bit further. I don't know it's further than death, but this one's just very harsh in a lot of ways the other two aren't, even during their heavier sections. We have a track that wants to feel weighty in a lot of ways that even the heaviest sections of the previous two songs did not aim for. Is this something we're going to experience more? I don't know. I can't know. It's the first time I'm hearing this. But I really hope we don't continue to move in this direction. I think it works as contrast. It certainly works as the shortest song on the album as well. It's nice to have a little break here and there, but it's not. It carried very little of what I've been enjoying from the album. Oh, we also had layered vocals, though. That's cool. I would like to have those carried over. I'd like to have the harsh cleans, contorted, the compressed cleans brought over in future tracks. There's a lot of really neat singular ideas here that I'd like to hear in situations divorced from where they were presented here. Um, oh, one last thing. So, one of the things that I talked about on the last track was that once again, in several of the places, when the vocals became growls, the guitar work also simplified. And so the moment when a melodic moment could shine, when it's not competing with anything else, they choose not to go in that route. And I really appreciated here how we had more melodic guitar lines against the growling vocals. I'd love to hear more of that. When we go to just straight chugging and growls, it really loses my attention. Two things in metal I'm just not a big fan of working at the same time and leaving all this empty space for the melodic, for the lead line that they consistently cram so much into. And it's empty. There's actually time for someone to be there, and no one wants to do it at those points. And it's kind of funny in some ways, uh, but it is a bit frustrating every time it happens, at least for me. Again, like I said, some people might come to this and feel the opposite. They feel relief when we get to when we get to those sections and there's no melody. They're like, finally, we can get to the metal. So I appreciate that I am not a metalhead. I appreciate metal, and there's some metal I've come to enjoy, but there's a lot of tropes of metal, qualities of metal that bounce off of me. A lot of the metal I like is stuff that pulls from outside of metal. So I appreciate I'm not the audience for stuff like this, and the fact that I'm finding things to enjoy is probably should probably be good enough. Yeah, I guess next up is the lyrics, huh? I mean, short track makes about right amount of sense. Let's do it. And this track is about being consumed by a sentient planet? Maybe? Here's the sentence that makes me think of that. It says, "This planet is chaos alive." It could also just mean that the inhabitants of the planet are chaotic. It could be that there's some sort of hive mind idea going on. Doesn't necessarily mean that the planet is alive, but it also says swirling, writhing, life with and without form. A monstrous forge surging blind. Would the planet be the forge? Is it wildly making stuff on the planet? Is the planet controlling the inhabitants? I don't know. Regardless, though, the chorus that comes up a couple of times is, "This planet is chaos alive. It makes me wish for silence. A day that near ruins the night. It makes me felt a life to come." To be so fearlessly devoured by cursed light. Flight mode engaged, infinite windows, wildly open and close. The savage grounds have us tethered. We need to make it back. So the planet itself, whether we want to see that as a sentient planet or just the flora of the planet, is holding their ship down to the ground. It says it has us tethered. The savage grounds have us tethered. But we need to make it back. We need to escape. He calls for flight mode to engage. But the planet is chaos alive. And as we see in our final two stanzas, they didn't make it out. At the pits of Laihem, which I guess Laihem is the planet, every cell inside our bodies burn to extract the unknown essence, a substance risen out of distant stars. So there is something within their bodies that the planet wants, and it's something that doesn't exist here. It only exists from where they came from. It only exists because they're human. From the pits of Laihem come the fumes of avarice and lust, inciting states of mass delusion. Suddenly, we no longer see the stars. So, they are swallowed up by the planet, metaphorically or literally. I'm not quite sure. But regardless, they're now trapped on this planet. Their search has led them to a bad situation. Let's continue on. We got waves below, which I assume we're going to be talking about some sort of liquid beneath the surface of Laihem, since that's where they're currently at. Is the song chronological? I don't know. They put that into my mind at the beginning. But assuming it is chronological, that's where we're at right now. Let's dive into Waves Below. If there was a time to do atmospheric storytelling, now's the time. It's really interesting because all those pedal tone hits are on, they're coming off of 4 into the downbeat of the new bar. A lot of intensity in this track, which makes sense if they're trying to escape somewhere. That quick bass kick stuff, bass guitars going. Yeah, I like these chords. It's a little bit about pushing forward. It's a little bit of tension about the fear that leads, ahead of them. But there's a lot of perseverance in here as well, just pushing forward regardless. Yeah, I like how the tempo hasn't gone half time. The drums are still pushing hard, but the guitars pull it back. And so it opens the song up a little bit. Yeah, just really great melodic sense. I could praise the solos on this album all day. Yeah. Oh, whoa. I really like that hi-hat idea. Oh, push it over to the twinkling of the ride. Especially when this cleaner guitar comes in over on the left. You got the synth in the background during this section, making it feel much larger. There is an idea of descent across this entire track. And now a rising. What are they going to do here? Yeah, it's not a fade out, it's a dispersal of sound. So that's 4 for 4 on that type of ending. They really enjoy that. And it's not bad. Honestly, if we had listened to just one of these songs, I'd be like, oh, that's a nice way to end it. It's just kind of comical in its repetition through the album that it seems to be the only way they end songs. That doesn't mean it's bad. Like I said, it's just a pattern I picked up. So yeah, for the most part, this is a lot of more of the same. Really strong melodic sections, really strong death metal sections, bringing them together. We are seeing more cleans than harshes in this the last 2 tracks. That doesn't seem right. Oh no, Laihem didn't have a lot of cleans in it. So just this track then. A lot of cleans in it. We started off with a reprisal of that compressed clean, and then a lot of the rest was clean, and occasionally we had the growling come in, especially closer to the end as we incorporated new ideas like the 16th note picking, especially pushing it against the 16th notes on the bass kick and really getting this intensity out of it. And of course, the guitars were not shredding. They were staying on a single note for 4 hits. So they were basically playing quarter notes that they just had 4 attacks on before they moved on. Same type of stuff that goes on with a lot of black metal style guitar work. And it was really interesting because it increases the intensity. And I think intensity is something that this track is really big on. The last track dealt with unification of sound, which I didn't even think about, but if the planet is alive and if it pulled them down into some sort of depths of the planet, the unification of sound would be the singular terror that they have, that they aren't going to be able to leave this one like they've left all the others. They collected their data, and now the planet wants to collect something of theirs, and the planet is the adversary. It is one. You might be dealing with the plants and whatever creatures are on it, but it's sort of still personified as the planet. So having a singular sound underneath everything worked really well for that track. This one had a bit more intensity to it, though. Even from the start, there is now cause for panic. The mission cannot be underway because the crew is under attack by a planet itself. And the situation is so dire that they can't even see the stars from the cockpit. So, yeah, having an intensity at the beginning of the track and keeping it up through most of this, I think, is important. There's another motif that I picked up on in this track, though, other than just intensity and forward drive, which we heard so much of, is descent. There were, on multiple occasions, guitar riffs that dealt with falling pitch, starting from a higher note, moving to a lower one. We had these ideas all the way up until the end. Even when we started utilizing the 16th notes in the guitars, we still saw this concept. It wasn't until the final 2 minutes or so when we kind of burst free out of that darkness. Found a brighter sound and reached something a little bit more triumphant. I don't know that it was necessarily success or triumph that we listened to, but there was a joy in it that was not found elsewhere. The rest of the track typically dealt with tension in some form or another that could represent so many different things. Our characters are in a very tense place right now. Tension makes a lot of sense. We did have this really neat solo that took a long time to get to a point of the shreddy side that the solo writing has showcased. It started off a bit moodier, really playing around with longer notes. And it took a good 16 bars, maybe, to get to a point where they began to even introduce some faster tones, some faster playing until halfway into the solo, 70% way into the solo, when we finally get some shredding out of it. I thought this was really interesting, and I'm curious if it has anything to talk about regarding the story. If we look at the lyrics that came before it and the lyrics that came after it, if this guitar is telling us the story of the events that came between them. That's not something we typically look at here because it would require me to listen to the lyrics in relationship to the music and know where the lyrics take place at. That's not something that is easy to do on a short schedule like this. And I say short schedule like this isn't going to be some 3-hour video. But I like to keep these things a little on the shorter end, and I also have my own scheduling that I have to plan around. So that's not something that I find to be feasible at the moment. But it is something that I think this band might be doing more often than not, is telling the story through their solos, and it is an aspect of the song I'm not being able to pick up on because I look at the music and lyrics separately. The last thing I want to touch on, I got a question I put on my little notes. Power metal? They always come in threes. I probably got another yawn right around the corner. There was a moment in here, closer to the end of the track, and I was listening, and the vocals moved into a specific direction. They were the clean vocals, and I was like, oh, that's familiar. And I listened to what the guitars were doing, and I was like, wait a second, we got ourselves a dash of power metal in here. And it was the most unexpected realization. But I do think this is melodeath in a lot of ways. The prog metal aspect I don't think is as strong. I don't know why that tag is there on Rate Your Music. I don't know why it's the primary tag. A lot of these tracks, while being longer, are not really progressive. I've mentioned multiple times they're quite plainly utilizing the melodeath genre and its tropes and ideas. The vocals are a little bit outside of melodeath's typical usage. And now that I'm thinking about it, they are kind of very, what did I say? Power metal. You know, we just listened to, what did we listen to? What was that group called? Glory Hammer, yesterday. And that vocal style is very clear in my mind. So How do I make this go away? There might be a dash of power metal in here, but I still wouldn't call it prog. I don't know. This is pretty straightforward death metal. Even when we look at the structure of it, we have that one track that I said felt like an A section, but even this 10-minute track right here was verse, chorus, bridge, pre-verse, verse, chorus. There's a small transition to take us out of the bridge into our third verse. And we had some variations on the chorus to wrap the song up. So it doesn't fit directly in line, but it's not, I don't know, it's not really doing anything hyper progressive. At least not in my mind. Maybe y'all feel differently. Let me know in the comments if you are like very sure this is proggy. You know, like this is definitely prog metal, man. What are you even talking about? I don't know. So far we're over halfway done. We just passed the midpoint both in track number and in length. We have less music to go than what we have listened to. And I'm not really getting a prog edge to it. A lot of it has followed more traditional elements of melodeath. But the power metal angle I'm starting to see, and even when I listen to some of the music, some of the guitar lines, I'm starting to hear a little bit more power metal elements. I'm like, you know, this kind of makes sense. There's a little bit of power metal in here. And I think it's really interesting because power metal tends to invite cheese. And I don't feel much of that campiness in here. I mean, it's a sci-fi epic by a bunch of metal performers. There's going to be something a bit nerdy about that, and I think the camp is going to come through just a tad bit, but I think for the most part it's all played rather seriously. It's very different from Glory Hammer yesterday, which is cheesy through and through. There's a campy element to all of it, everything from the lyrics to the musical ideas to the delivery of concepts to the vocal work. It's all very tongue-in-cheek. They know it's a bit campy and they play it up. This, I think, has a campy foundation that they do really good job of covering over and kind of erasing from the rest of the track. I think if any other band had done this project, if IOTUNN had written this project and given it to another band to record, it would have come out really cheesy. In some of the best ways, I'm gonna say. I love campy stuff. Okay, so I say that with a lot of endearing feelings. But they do a really good job of playing all this straight, which I think is fascinating. So lyrically, this is about the descent into the planet. This is a very dark subterranean area. Says the light gathers no momentum for chasing shadows away. That is such a good line. Because light, of course, is waves and light waves, right? And they have movement to them. It's very rare for us to talk about light in a sense of momentum, but it's scientifically accurate. It says a cursory reading of the atmosphere reveals a cause for concern. Absence of life, chilling omen. Something was here and might still be. Just really puts us in the right mindset right from the opening stanza. We are somewhere where we're not supposed to be. Our eyes are not adjusted for this area. There seems to be no life in here. This is not some place that's good for us. Even the atmosphere, it seems, is not something we could work within. I'm going to assume they have some sort of suits on, yeah? But he says, I'm sensing waves below, which is wild. So he says, we're in search of portals that lead to subterranean worlds unknown, drifting along with a foreboding mechanical pulse. It's really interesting. They say that I'm reading portals a bit loosely. They're just searching for paths, right? They just need to get somewhere. But it says that they're navigating the endless, oppressive desert and twisting cityscapes bizarre. So they've gone under the surface of the planet and they're finding deserts and cities, and they feel waves below their feet. It's like there's another entire civilization and world beneath the surface of this planet. It says, in time we found our way inside, and they found the source of the waves, and it grows ever nearer. Interestingly, it goes into an idea that the darkness has creatures in it, or machines. It says the constant whirring. Oh, the constant whirring of the nightmare machine is maddening. Calls them eyeless engineers of the deep. So there are things down here, creatures, inhabitants, who have built machines. They're technologically advanced in some way, and these machines can put, it says, the images produced in my mind to counteract the black wreak havoc on my synapses. So the images put into his head are just destroying his body. It says the shambling through corridors of darkness unending. None of those meant to be felt, seen, or heard, to never know when morning comes. It is a terrifying visualization here of being stuck in the dark with these images in your minds and knowing that light is your savior at this point, and coming to the realization you'll probably never see light again. So that's interesting because the music told me of a descent, which I found in the lyrics, but then I also said that there's a moment where the sound burst through and it sounded a bit more triumphant. I said it wasn't really triumph though, it was just more positive. And it's interesting that around that point, I believe lyrically, we're talking about seeing these images from the nightmare machine. So not quite the positive victory I was reading in the music. I'm curious then what was happening with the music that would have led to that. What their intentions were with that. Alright, 3 tracks to go. We have 2 on the shorter side, a 7 something and a 6 something, and then our final 13-minute epic epilogue. The epic log. That doesn't work because that sounds like 2 words we already have. Let's dive into this. Next up we have the Tower of Cosmic Nihility. Let's see where they're taking us on this one. If the last thing we saw was darkness and odd images, that rumble is a perfect way to introduce this new track. Yeah, okay. Going with more of a hard rock vibe here. Yeah, bringing in a little bit of animosity into this section. The bass punching through when it can. coming out of that with a ton of power. I like that really sparse synth that we've heard 2 whole notes from. Solid harmonies. Alright. Interesting shift here. We do sort of return to a bit more of the melodeath and as we get further into the track, but we do utilize a little bit of that hard rock sound that we introduced the song in and keep it musically a bit on the lighter side. We don't ever really hit much of the heaviness, the weight that the death metal tends to bring to the table. It's refreshing. Vocally, atmospherically, we don't really change much, but just having the guitar and drums change up just this on the tiniest bit, I think it adds a lot. It creates a bit of levity, which I think is interesting given that this track is called The Tower of Cosmic Nihility, which is usually something that's not going to be simple and light. That's sort of a pretty heavy topic, I would say. Aside from that, though, solid guitar solo. Once again, I love their guitar solos, and I think it's because, like I alluded to, or like I guessed last time around, I do think that they're utilizing them storytelling wise. And on a second time through, I'd probably have the lyrics up and listen to the lyrics while I'm listening to the music, and take in the solos as more narrative exploration between lyrical stanzas. But I think that attention to detail of making the guitar a musical narrator really forces them to keep in mind that the guitar can't simply shred for an entire solo. It can shred for a little bit, it can noodle for a little bit, but it also has to tell the story. And if intensity is part of the story, you can shred more often. But if it's not, we got to hold it back a little bit, which is what we saw in the last track, where our guitar solo was, for the majority of it, rather long and slow and open-ended, really providing more of an atmospheric melody line rather than a pressing one. Yeah, I think that's it for this one. What do we got? We got 2 more left. 6.5 and 14 almost. Okay. Okay. Let's hit some lyrics, I suppose. Before we get into this, I just want to say real quick that despite the drastic changes in lengths of songs from track to track, like I mentioned, we sort of have this tick-tock idea where we have a shorter track followed by a longer one. Whether it was the 11-minute Access All Worlds or the 7.5-minute Voyage of the Garganey 1, they all sort of have the same amount of lyrics to them, which I think is fascinating. It means that either the longer tracks have more uses of a chorus, and the chorus is simply not restated in the lyrics, the written lyrics, or a majority of the longer tracks are that same 7 minutes of core first chorus writing that we've seen throughout all of this. Access All Worlds and Waves Below, both despite being double digits in length, follow the verse, chorus, bridge, verse, chorus. We just have longer bridges to them. Maybe longer outros, which the outros tend to have a variation of either the verse or the chorus going on. Sometimes they have brand new outros, but they still follow the idea, which means that we are just spending a long time in these sections, whether it's due to a number of times that we go through the loop. Maybe the vocals are said slowly, so instead of 8 bars in our verse, we might do 16, and that's going to really space out the track. Or maybe our bridge is a really long guitar solo, a 1-minute guitar solo, so that's going to add some length to it. But what that means in the end result, though, is that the lyrics are still just going to be 3 verses, a chorus, maybe something for the bridge, and an outro, which is going to set us about 6 to 7 stanzas that are the same through every track. This one happens to be a little shorter at 4 stanzas, but that also means that it has less vocals in it than our 4-minute song. But for the most part, they're rather consistent with the amount of words they put in a track, regardless of length, which I thought was interesting. Speaking of interesting, the story is getting good. So, these people left their home planet in search of answers, I think. Maybe to help them solve the problems back on their life, their Earth. And they've been captured by this planet, and the people of the darkness have taken them hostage of some sort and brought them to the Tower of Cosmic Nihility. I don't know if that's a word. I keep wanting to say cosmic nihilism. In here, our narrator begins to accept nihilism. He is shown shapes and patterns that push all of his rage and elation off of the edge. All of the heights of his emotion are being removed. He is being flattened emotionally. And we have a chorus that is repeated towards the end. It says, I believe in solace. I accept meaninglessness. I believe in blindness, and I embrace the emptiness. Which I think it's interesting that the people who brought him here to do this brainwashing type thing are also ones who live in empty subterranean worlds with empty cityscapes and pure darkness. They've almost crafted their entire existence around this idea of nihilism that this tower possibly evoked on them. It also might have been machinery that causes specific brainwaves to activate, much like the nightmare machine. Then it talks about the Tower of Cosmic Nihility and kind of what it does. But he says, what it said to me, though, what it revealed, was that we may wander, lost in light. Remember, we already talked about how stars are light, and that space is monochrome, and that they were constantly traveling towards new lights. Right? So this is the opposite. It says we can wander lost in that light. The cosmic horror empowers me, though, and escape from my need to believe. I can stare into the vast, cold void to conquer. So, being overcome by nihilism has allowed him to say, you know, maybe going from planet to planet isn't what I want to do. Maybe I don't even need to do it. Maybe I'm fine just sitting here. It says, through infinite, bewildering, starry mists and blackness that lifts the burden of will off our hands. We no longer have to figure out what we want. Nothing matters, so why do anything? And that's where our character is at the moment. They have begun to embrace nihilism and are ditching their journey and task to understand everything out there, possibly in hopes to help their original planet. Interesting. I wonder if this is a turn for our characters or a hurdle to overcome. We only have 20 minutes, give or take, of music left. There's a lot of places for the story to go, but it's also real close to the end, and this could feel a bit cramped if they were using this as a hurdle for our character to get over and complete their journey and return home. I don't think that's going to happen. I think this is a turn. This is going to show a slope, a downslide of our character, and we will see some sort of tragic ending in our final track. That's my guess, just based on writing pacing. Alright, let's get back to it. Was there anything in there I wanted to talk about? Tying themes together? I don't think so. Hard rock track, nihilism. I'm not seeing parallels. Then let's move on. Next up, we have the Weaver system. Let's dive into this one and see where they're going to take us now. I've also noticed pretty much everything on this track has been 4/4, except, was it track number 2 that did the 4/4/2, the 10-beat phrase? I think that's the only time I've noticed that we've deviated metrically. Beautiful though. I love when the two guitars do separate lines. I wish they would do it more often. It seems the back of this album, the guitars are typically working together, doing a single line more often than the separated ideas that we heard in the beginning. So return to that form right here is real nice. Quite appreciated. That's really funky. Yeah, having to clean against that electric guitar sounds real good. Okay, so that's why that feels odd. It's an extra bar thrown in. It's still 4/4, but I think we're doing a 9-bar phrase. 2 groupings of 4 with an extra bar that links between the two, which is really just choice. Love the bass partaking in this. Interestingly, it parallels a lot of the emotions I felt in our opening track of infinite possibility and the adventure ahead of us. There's an intensity and optimism here. I think this is a very clear example of why I'm not a big fan of the Growl production. It simply dominated the entire sounds. There's a middle point between the typical tucking the growls into the music and barely being able to hear them, and them completely overpowering everything to a point they almost feel unnatural. And maybe that's the point as well. Maybe when we look at what's being said using the growl vocals, we'll find that the vocalist chooses the type of vocals for specific incidents, specific ideas, maybe even specific characters. I've been reading everything from the viewpoint of a single narrator, but it's possible that it's not supposed to be read that way. And maybe for whatever reason, this was chosen to be very large, very resonant, very reverby for a specific reason, and not just because it sounded good to them or to the engineer. Could have an artistic reason for it, but the end result is something that just completely overshadows everything, and I'm just not a huge fan of it. Well, especially in specific situations like that. Musically, this follows in the footsteps of a lot of the same ideas that we've heard throughout this throughout this album. We have these beautiful melodic landscapes. We have the atmospheric sections. We have more of the rigid, the metal sections. But what's really cool is our intro here did something that I've been missing a little bit. We didn't get to hear a lot of it throughout the rest of the track, but which is just that the two guitars do different things. We started off the track emphasizing this. Sorry, we started off the album emphasizing this more frequently. But somewhere in the middle of the album, we shifted to an idea that both guitars are going to do the same thing. Sometimes harmonizing, which is nice, but I just really like the counterpoint. And like I've mentioned in many analysis sections so far, I really like their counterpoint writing. I think they do a fantastic job of giving multiple instruments a lead line. In fact, we still haven't really reached that layering height that we had in track 2, I think it was, maybe 4, with the bass, the two guitars, and the vocals all doing different things and passing the baton and having harmonies and doing counterpoint. Like, it's such a good moment, and I'd love to hear more of that. But they sort of went in the opposite direction, like I said, and they kind of focused in more on singularity between the guitars. So it was really nice to have that intro at the beginning of this track that gave us more of that split guitar writing, because I do think they have a knack for it. They do a really good job of doing that. We got to hear a bit more of it in this track, which I liked. We got to hear more of the bass, which is fantastic. The drumming is consistently solid and accurate. And then the vocals, I think the vocals they're slipping for me a little bit, and I know I wrote it down, but it's a little bit of the production. I don't have a problem with the vocalist, the way they sound, the timbres they have, the styles of Harsh. Well, the style of Harsh isn't my cup of tea, but it's fine. The production on it all it makes it all super big. And I don't always think it works. And I think it's working less as the album goes on. And I don't know if that's because the musical changes, the small musical changes they're making, are not working with it, or if it's because I'm becoming weary of that hyper reverbed vocals. But yeah, I would not. This is one of the few times, and see, I don't even know if I want to commit to this. I was going to say this is one of the few times that I'd really like an instrumental of an album. But I don't even think that's accurate, because this album would not work without the vocal melody for the cleans. And I'd even say that it would feel a bit anemic without the growls. In fact, because the vocals are so large, the whole album might feel a bit empty without them. It's produced with the vocals in mind. It would feel weird. So, I'm going to hit some lyrics, and then we'll move on to our final track. And lyrically, we can now explore this civilization that we've landed upon. These night dwellers, as I referred to them earlier, seem to be called the Weavers. And it says in the chorus, here the Weavers discovered paradise, created and immortalized their bonds, no fear of night, erected heavenly armory. The Weavers erased their parasites, denied the politics of I, saw with higher light that flows continuous, undefined. It basically removes wants and needs and personality for the collective. It's interesting that this is where they took the idea of nihilism. It's sort of a positive idea of it, which I suppose nihilism could be seen in various ways. If nothing matters and my actions don't matter, or another way to see it would be if nothing matters, then we should make the best of what we have right now. Maybe? I don't know. That seems like a little bit of a stretch, but that seems to be where they're going here. They've denied the politics of I. It's not about me. It's not about what I want. It's about what's best for us. It says that through the darkness, they see a higher light, which I think is a really cool phrase there. Says he looks above, though, and he sees his ship gently swaying. It's free to access all worlds. And it's almost as if this moment is presenting a choice. Stay with the Weavers and experience this deep connection that you've not felt before, or continue your mission. Go explore the rest of everything. The track ends with what is lost, recovered. All is lost when uncovered. I don't know what that cryptic message is supposed to mean. But I think that's what this is about. He's embraced nihilism and sees two paths ahead of him. With his new mindset, what is he going to choose? That's my angle. So, let's find out with our final track, Safe Across the Endless Night. Actually, it sounds like I can already tell which way he chose. Let's dive into this and wrap this track album up. Bass taking the lead already. Interesting phrasing on the vocals here. Wow, really going with a large sound here between both of our harsh vocals. Dude, that whole tom and pedal run was so good. Flat out death drumming right here. Okay. Yeah, I'm always down for giving the bass a little bit of spotlight. It's kind of weird. I just want to get to the lyrics. That's kind of a first. You know what? This track is giving me a lot of prog metal vibes. In fact, this is probably the third section that's got kind of a Dream Theater thing going on. And I dig having the twinkling guitar over there with the palm muted stuff down here at the bottom and the vocals on top of all of it. Yeah. And the nice drumming. It's not just rigid. There's some really neat ideas going on in here. Bouncing the spotlight between snare and hi-hat and bass kick. Yeah, this is easily going to be my favorite track on the album. The vocal production works right here. Yes. Oh yeah, really nice progression going into this the section here. I like how they use a super fuzzy synth. It was one of the first things we heard in the album, and it certainly puts you right in the mind of sci-fi for some reason. Well, this is a bit somber, isn't it? The natural fade out. The one we had been denied for 6 songs was the dispersing fade out. We finally get it here at the end. So yeah, this one sat in my mind a lot closer to prog metal. And maybe the last couple of tracks were alluding towards that. Which is interesting then, because this song takes a vaguely linear path from pretty typical melodeath with a heavy death element to it into something closer to Dream Theater by the end of the album. And we do have sort of a gradual shifting towards that, at least from my perspective. It's interesting to see the sound sort of lighten up over the album. in that sense, where at the beginning I was a bit off-put by a lot of it, and by the end I'm loving the chord progressions, I'm loving the harmonies going on, I'm loving all the uses of counterpoint, and all the different sections to the tracks, the emotional resonances of places got a lot deeper. You know, we started off saying that the opening track was very clear in its intentions. When the atmospheric aspects came in, you immediately felt what was going on. And I feel that they've become muddier over time. And that could be due to the philosophical aspects of the lyrical story, where everything was very black and white at the beginning. We had a task at hand, we're going to do it. And at least where we left off on track 6, there was some ambiguity. Should I continue or shan't I? Should I? Um, and maybe that ambiguity begins to show through in the emotion of the atmospheres as well, which is why we get more complex writing at the end. I don't know. I do know that each subsequent song, though, got better, and it doesn't surprise me that this final one, Safe Across the Endless Night, is my favorite. When I put this into the spreadsheet for albums I've listened to this year, under favorite song, Safe Across the Endless Night. Easy, by a long shot. This was my favorite. There's just no competition here. And through that lens, you know, we can sit here and talk about all sorts of things going on. I even mentioned that the vocals, the width and power of the vocals works so much bigger here because the instrumentation was wider and larger. The production was still a little flat for me, but when the vocals came in, the width and reverb didn't overpower everything. In fact, they sort of faded behind the guitars, which is where they should. The secondary qualities of vocals, which are all of the elements that make vocals sound good, it's going to be your reverb, your compression, your any sort of minor echo you're going to put on it, your doubling up of tracks. All of that needs to sort of be hidden behind your primary recording. A lot of it needs to get mixed behind the guitar work so it doesn't overpower you. It's sort of like, you know, when you listen to pop music, and especially like if you have like that friend, or especially an older person, maybe it's an older friend or a parent or something, and they've picked up on the buzzword auto-tune, right? When they say something feels auto-tuned, that means it's been over-tuned, right? But if they don't pick up on it, it's because the auto-tune was done tastefully. It was done just enough to affect it without being present to the listener. And that's what I think a lot of these secondary elements, a lot of the mixing, production of the vocals, they should be imperceptible. They should be there. If they weren't there, you would know something was off, but you shouldn't be able to single them out. And I think the fact that you can easily single out the reverb and the way that it pushes out to the side, the spatialization of it it's not bad, but it is very ear-catching, and it distracts me from the rest of the song. And at that point, where I pointed at like 6-7 minutes into the track, with the guitars as they were, and the production between the vocals and guitars, it really clicked. Everything about this track just started to make sense for me. Maybe if I go back to the beginning, it'll make sense too. Maybe it was an acclimation period. I don't know. But everything just worked here. We had so many beautiful moments. We had the guitar duet, which we hadn't heard anything up to this point. The drumming was on fire. We had some phenomenal fills. Best fills of the album, easy. We had really groovy rhythms, just what the drummer is playing, their pattern that they're playing under the band. Really groovy, kind of melodic in some ways, not focusing on a rigid, snare on the backbeat and bass kick every other beat, or anything like that. Like a lot of the drumming up until here has been really rigid. You pick your pattern and you stick with it. There's no syncopation to it. There's no altering of sounds. If your snare is on 1 and 3, your snare is going to be on 1 and 3 forever. And here, it felt like every looping of the pattern was different. And it was unweighted. It wasn't symmetrical. Sometimes we would have the hi-hat as the lead, and we would get 3 hits of that back to back, like beats 3, 2, 3, and 4. And then we would get 1 or 2 snare hits, and then the bass would come in. And it was just really pleasant to listen to because it took a more melodic approach to it. And I kind of wish more of the album was composed like this one was. Now, it could be that because of the mental awakening of track 5 that led to this further understanding of the universe in track 6, and maybe we continue to explore that here lyrically, that it makes sense that the music expands as well. Maybe that's what they were going for, and if so, beautiful thematic cohesion. But as far as just me as a casual listener, it also means that when I pop this album in, I'm more apt to just jump to the final 2 or 3 tracks than listen to the album as a whole, because at least on this first listen, the first few tracks bounced off of me a bit. Really cool moments within them, but on the whole, they weren't quite my jam, whereas they shifted into something that was by the end of the album. Something I haven't touched on yet, though, and I really want to put a little bit of attention on, is the enunciation of the growls. Throughout most of these sections, the growls are clearly pronounced and very clearly produced as well, as they're given a ton of prominence, and I can make out a lot of what the vocalist is saying. That is a huge bonus in my points for in a huge bonus in my books as far as growling goes. I'm just not a real big fan of growls I can't understand. I'm not a real big fan of vocals I can't understand just in general. But growls specifically tend to be a bit muddier and difficult to hear. So extra attention towards enunciation is important. And I think this vocalist does a really good job of that. So, yeah. Interesting end. I'm going to hit the lyrics, and since we are probably only going to be at 3 hours by the time this is over, I'll pop in the acoustic Voyage and we'll see what's going on with that. The lyrics here are... This is a fun twist, I think. It follows in line with a lot of the through points we've been exploring on the album. We have a person who has chosen to stay on this planet. There's a few stanzas that speak to why, but most of it is about this concept of nihilism, once again, and the way that it has altered their perception of things. For instance, it doesn't matter that their home planet is dying, it's on the verge of death, or maybe is already dead. We don't know. We've been on this journey for so long. How can we even know what's going on back there? As we have stated on like 3 tracks now, where we came from is so far behind us. Is there really a point in turning back if we found some answers? Is it even still something that could be saved? They choose to stay here. And there's one point towards the end, we're a couple stanzas out from the outro. It says, breathing the warm night air on a sphere like so many others. There's nothing special about this planet. It's just like every other planet. But this one sustains my body, enjoying what little is left of a bizarre vacation, knowing full well the coming uncertainty. The jet black sea looms from afar, and abyssic forever opens wide. A black hole appears just outside of the planet. And I guess he knew that, Or maybe knew it retrospective. Well, no, he says knowing full well the coming uncertainty. So yeah, he sits here, lying on the planet, enjoying his time, knowing a black hole will erupt. Erupt's a weird word for that, but I hope you know what it says. Wormholes are turning outwards inside, fiercely cast, towards other lands, star devils, violent, blind with fright. The path is chosen, our lives we token. Could we ask for more? This wormhole, which I still read as a black hole, but wormhole is just absolutely tossing everything, ripping things asunder, throwing people into alternate areas, passing them to other parts of the stars, the space. And it kills our protagonist, or at least puts them close to death. And we get some final thoughts. And he returns to a phrase that has started a few stanzas, says, "Hold the window open." In fact, it's how the song starts, as a window opens. And then we have "Now the windows open" in stanza 3. And now in stanza 11, as we finish this up, "Hold the window open for dreams of stars, for echoes of memories. A way out of memories, a way out of this game, a final flight for the sin. Infinite windows for dreams of stars, for echoes of memories." He is at this point accepting what happens. I believe that in this reading, leaving his home planet in search of a way to save it was a sense of running away. There was no end to this mission. Anyways, you can't capture all of the data of space. And the chances that another planet will give you the answers to save yours, despite all the changes between them, is pretty slim. Especially as we saw in the opening track, I think it was, that he recognized there is infinite potential in any direction. Space is big. And at this point, he's realized, I'm done with it. I'm going to stop running from my problems and I'm going to face this head on. And if that means the death of me, then that means the death of me. And so I think it's really interesting at the beginning of the album, he's choosing to run from a planetary destruction, and he ends up on a planet and is fine with its destruction. He has made peace with that. I don't know if there's something deeper here. Maybe there is a message for the listener other than just a story. I don't see one, but I see breadcrumbs of one. But I do think that a story just based on our captain, their journey, the way they fought against the will of the universe, it seems. The universe is not happy with him. He was supposed to die on that other planet, and the universe has been slowly trying to get him to do that. Anyways, been catching up to him, and finally did, and he accepted it this time. If the story has anything past that, I hope so, because that's an interesting story, but it's also a bit of a darker story, and I tend to like something more of a positive, even if the tale itself is dark, a positive reflection or message within it. But regardless, I still think it works well, completely on the surface level of just the events that happen to the characters, with nothing metaphorical or extra for the listener. And we do have a drastic, I was talking about how the music shifted drastically from from death metal with a little bit of power metal leanings to this prog metal stuff that we have here. Huge shift from our first track, but we also have a very huge shift in perspective of our vocalist, our narrator. Yeah, that works. And it's not like the musical styling is completely outside of the box from where they started. It's still very close. It utilizes a lot of the same timbres, and for the most part utilizes a lot of the same ideas we have heard throughout the album, just in larger frequency. A lot of the things I loved here have been explored previously, just not as deeply. And that is why I love this song so much, because it takes all those moments where I'm like, yes, I love that. And we're looking at something else now. And just said, okay, all these things Bryan liked, cram them into one song. And of course, it's not, that's not how the real process went, but that's what it feels like. Almost everything I pointed to and said, yes, more please, they made an entire song out of. And it's almost like these ideas have been part of our narrator from the beginning. The musical motifs have been there. They've just been fleeting moments where now they're explored more fully, where our narrator's in a different mindset. If that's true, and they left those breadcrumbs to this more typical prog metal stuff throughout the album so that we could increase those breadcrumbs in intensity until we built an entire song based off of similar ideas, Gene, yes. That would have worked a lot better if somebody in the band was named Gene, especially if the composer was named Gene. Anyways, yeah, let's hit this, acoustic Voyage. I don't know that I'm going to have an analysis of it, but I'm going to listen to it as soon as I turn the camera off anyways, and, well, as other YouTubers say, might as well make the content. So, let's do it. I'm still going to use the old picture from their metal album, and that is going to remain because I don't have it set up for another title there. But yeah, let's just hit it. It's 16.5 minutes, and I think it's a medley of the entire album compressed into 16 minutes. So we'll see how this goes. There, I did it that way, manually. This is the opening of the album, though, isn't it? It has the melancholy, it has the adventure. Beautiful, though. Is this what was hidden underneath all of that death metal playing in our opening couple of tracks? Did I miss this gorgeous writing because of how it was delivered to me? It's possible. It wouldn't be the first time. There's some of the synth, which I was curious when that was going to come in. but I thought there was also vocals on this rendition. Yeah, there is a deep sadness to this that I did not pick up on, and it really explains why it was so easy for a narrator to turn over to nihilism.
Access all worlds and paint our way through stars, aligned and well.
Interesting. I remember these lyrics. Interesting to hear it spoken word, though.
Divine, eternal life. Faster and faster through the unending black. For every speck of light that passes, a new dawn abides. Miracle or disaster, we shall know soon enough. Once the fabric of space is cut, and the edges are frayed and frayed.
I like that little turn we just had. I don't remember that either. It's interesting because there's parts that stand out. I'm like, oh yeah, I remember that lick, or I remember that emotion. There's other parts I'm like, I don't remember this, but it feels like it would have fit. So it's kind of like a medley, but they're not running together quite like a medley would. It's a series of excerpts, I think might be the way to word that. see this also forces our two guitars to take up different roles more frequently. So I'm really enjoying this. I do wish we had strung excerpts of the lyrics from each section as well.
The shambling through corridors of darkness unending.
This is kind of cool though, with the spoken word.
None of this is meant to be felt, seen, or heard. To never know when morning comes. The spirits are bound in a portrait of mind, arrested ebb and flow, and the story so far, the loss of style and form, shapes distort, patterns dissolve, all rage and elation. Then off the edge.
It's interesting because the spoken word parts with the synth behind it always give it a really dark eeriness to it, which that section I think kind of worked because that was where he gave into the nihilism. Well, the first time worked too because it was when they got eaten. And they were exploring the subterranean caverns. That was supposed to be creeping and eerie. Yeah, this is... You got the call and response idea, or the passing of the baton even, kind of, in some ways. And this sounds like something that wasn't in the original, at least not the dualness of it, but might have been in one of the instruments. And was necessary to split it for this acoustic rendition. I do like how it seems they got together to release a an album. And probably like most supergroups, this is a secondary band for them. I think most of the bands I read that they came from are still operating, and yet they still came back together to make this. Like, this project is so special to them that they wanted to put an addendum onto it. See, in this, it feels a lot more calmer. All of the tension, the melancholy from our other tracks are gone. This is what the nihilism temple brought. It brought a calmness, a peace of self that was present in the lyrics, but I didn't catch in the music. And I wager this.
Opens. A stir awakens me. The heavens now prepared to die, to bring us safe across the endless night. The path has grown out of the dark. Make your ascensions to flight.
I just connected that the vocals are still very reverby.
For dreams of stars. For echoes of memories.
Oh, I forgot to mention the synth chords at the end of the original version of this track. Let me write that down. I do want to talk about it real quick. Yep, that's the same chord progression. Yeah, so I want to talk about that before we wrap this video up, is shifting to the synthesizer for the ending of the album shows unification. We have one instrument. It is showcasing, at least to me, all that's left, the only character left in our story. The first character listed in the opening track. The monochrome. Space. That's it. And its uncaringness. And oh man, that's even so good too. I'd mentioned this at the beginning, that in our opening, our intro to our first track, that there was hopefulness and, the anxiety of a new journey and melancholy, but there's also this uncaring element to that atmosphere that the synth was oh, this is even better. and that I likened that to being space. And that space doesn't care about you. Your planet dying means nothing to it. It's just another day in being space. It doesn't care that you're traveling all these light years to see all these planets. It's just space. It doesn't care about you. The thing left at the end of this album is still just the instrument that I use to personify space, and the whole concept of our main characters, that they learned that you don't always need to care about everything, that your place in your world, that your world is, or your world's place in the larger universe is not that important. And they came to embrace that same almost cold, calculating ideology that space must, because space is not sentient. And so that cycles in upon itself too. That is so good. Oh, that connected in so many ways I was not expecting. But also, I want to talk about the specific chords, in that it's one of the only times across the entire album that I think I heard a chord progression that really moved towards full, proper, complete tonal resolution. There is almost a musical personification of the acceptance that our vocalist was expressing just mere moments before, about understanding their place and allowing this wormhole to end their life, and being okay with that. And that acceptance is something that we couldn't hear elsewhere. There was always a tension or a melancholy or an excitement or something that kept everything moving. And this resolved things in such a way that it became finite. Both his life and his understanding of his life reached a point of ending. And the music does so too, properly wrapping everything up in a neat little bow. Those are my thoughts on IOTUNN's Access All Worlds. What did you think, though? Did you enjoy this? Was there anything that I missed that maybe you picked up on? Or maybe you have your own perspective on songs. Maybe you have a complete different perspective than me on most of these songs, and you really enjoyed the beginning and not so much the end. Let me know. Put that stuff down in the comments section. Oh, geez. Let's take that away. I was about to do this, and I can't do that from the other screen. Above the comment section is a description box. In there's a link to Linktree. Takes you here. You can find my music, ways to support the channel, a link to the Discord server, and so much more. Above that, if you could, like, subscribe, and ring the bell. I greatly appreciate all three. That wraps it up for today. I'll be back tomorrow morning for the Patreon live stream. I'll try to get that up by 5 p.m. Eastern Standard Time tomorrow night for everybody to watch. I did pretty good last week, but it really is all up to YouTube. If they block anything, how long it takes me to download from their servers, how long it takes me to upload back up to Odyssey. But the work that I have to put into grabbing a blocked video and getting it prepared for everyone else to watch is minimal. It's 20-30 minutes tops. Everything else is downloading and uploading. It's, oh, and also how long it takes for them to process the video, because I can't download it until it's been processed. So it's really out of my hands how soon I can get it out, but I do try to drop it every Sunday evening. And then Monday we'll begin next week's theme of dark ambient. Until next time, remember to be critical, not cynical, of the music you listen to, and have a fantastic morning, afternoon, or evening whenever you choose to watch my videos.